Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi
It's
wa
been,
barakatuh.
it has been so long, my brother.
How are you?
Yes.
Yes,
but
yes, it
but
has
you know,
been.
each night is truly a new adventure here. So, and
It is.
because we're unscripted, we never quite know where we're going to be led or where we're going to lead each other or mislead each other. But
Choose
this,
choose your own adventure.
yeah, this is the great mystery of these Ramadan evenings with the Quran.
Right.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, when we were initially talking about this, one of our hopes was that, we would, by practice, by engaging in this and by practicing it ourselves, that we would make it easy for us and others to really engage the text and to uh, to enjoy the text, to struggle with the text, and we know that, for especially for people who don't have extensive Arabic training, it can be sometimes an intimidating text, and but the beauty of these nights has just been that we've been able to just you know uh, I guess come to it as we are and
Mhm.
just try to figure out, with the help of the study of Quran and other works of commentary, just to try to understand, and also just looking at the plain sense of the Arabic and the English, and we've been just very sincerely engaging and struggling and interrogating, and in some ways interrogating each other as we do this. This is similar to, in traditional rabbinic education, the rabbis or the rabbinical students would sit with their chaver, with their study partner, and their job was to argue, read through scripture the way we're doing it, but in their case, the Hebrew Bible, read line by line and debate about it. And the debating wasn't meant to be hostile. Actually a kind of loving adversarial debate, where the idea is that by piously debating each other over the text, that we'll get to a deeper meaning, in
Yeah.
an expanded appreciation of the text, because in a way we're interrogating the text and we're interrogating each other, and it's a very rich way to read the Quran. And I think that this way of reading the Quran with a partner is so much richer than just reading it on my own. And
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. You know, I have a friend who's just in love with the Sunnah, and he finds these nuggets from the Prophet, and so he once told me that he found a hadith. I don't know where it is, so I can't cite the reference, but I remember distinctly. I'm reminded of it as you're describing this shared study practice, that the companions would sit yatadarasuna bainahum,
oh yes,
that they would,
same
yeah, it was an interactive,
interactive study.
conversational, right? And even you find in many hadith, when the Prophet instructs, it's through question and answer, it's through conversation. Can any of you tell me this? Um, Even the Quran has, some rhetorical questions
Yes, it
that it'll
does.
ask. And so this kind of interactive, engaged, conversational style is something that we've lost. We've gone to the one directional, long lecture style, which also has its charm and its
Sure.
eloquence and its appeal. But we also have this other way of doing things that we don't see as much. And I think part of it could be, because authority, right? If you're an authority, we've got a culture of authority, and it's typically, well established, and you're supposed to humble yourself and just absorb. And if you don't get something, it's because you know less. which is a good feeling, but it takes away this interactive questioning, and also we forget that the person who's on top always also doesn't know everything, and so it requires more vulnerability to engage in this kind of format, and I personally enjoy it.
Yeah, I do too, and I think that those of us who have been teaching in the classroom, whether it's a university classroom or a high school classroom or even an elementary school classroom, we all know how much we learn and benefit from our students who sometimes ask incredibly insightful questions without even knowing it themselves that they're asking something really penetrating and insightful. And so yeah, no, I like, I love this kind of interactive approach, and I'm really and it also kind of just, it really sometimes when we're passively absorbing the wisdom from an elder, sometimes we can get kind of foggy and zone out. But this really requires, it keeps us on our toes and keeps us thinking and keeps us active. And so it's really, I treasure this mode of interactive learning. The mission and vision of the American Islamic College, to me, pretty much now synonymous with the work. I believe in the transformative power of education, and not just education that is informative, but in education that is transformative, education that really changes how we live. But I think that the Muslims of America need a place that they can come as a Muslim space. This is their space. It belongs to them. Yes. And once again, I have to correct myself. This doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us, all of us. And so we really invite our community. We invite our fellow learners. We invite our fellow seekers to join this caravan of hope and this caravan of healing and this caravan of knowledge and to support in whatever way that you can. We will have a very exciting something to unveil. We just kind of thought this up the other day, and for those who go on to our website, aicusa.edu, and make a contribution of $50, at least $50 during the month of Ramadan, we now have a Ramadan Unscripted mug that we can send you. That's right. So this is a brand new thing. And so this isn't, it's not a $50 mug, but it's just a token. It's a way for us to kind of have a token of remembrance in your hand with your coffee or your tea, and to remember what we're doing. And to remember these very precious nights of Ramadan, and to, God willing, look forward to the next Ramadan as an opportunity for re-engaging and really, as Dr. Asrar, Dr. Mahan's teacher, said, really giving the Qur'an its due in this month that we celebrate as the month in which the Qur'an was gifted to humankind. All right.
Yeah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Yasin. So we have the heart of the Quran here, the Surah Yasin, which begins with these mysterious broken letters, which some take to be an allusion to the Prophet Muhammad as one of his names, like Taha was earlier.
Question.
Surah,
yes, I'm just wondering, so this surah is not in the middle of the Quran, and it's and so I'm wondering what it gives the commentators the sense that this is the heart of the Quran. Why is it that people say that this is the heart of the Quran?
So there, I'm looking at the commentary here, Study Quran, its introduction. It says it's known that after a well-known hadith, everything has a heart, and the heart of the Quran is Yasin. This is the saying of the Prophet Muhammad. Whosoever recites Yasin, God records for him the recitation of the Qur'an 10 times for his recitation of it. And, I was also looking at its thematic, position and arrangement. And one of the things that pops up, if I go back to the Meccan and Medinan group scheme, if I can do this for a second. So if you notice the first, if you can see the Quran as groups of Meccan and Medinan surahs, and obviously some of this is interpretive because some surahs, it's not, there are different traditions on whether it's Meccan or Medinan, but you can arrive at, by and large, this surah is Medinan, and most people might say it's Medinan or enough. And this surah is mostly Meccan, and most or enough say it's Meccan. So you can come up with this groups of one Meccan, one Medinan, a cluster. Meccan and Medinan, cluster. Meccan and Medinan, cluster. And the Quran is arranged in this way in 7 Meccan and Medinan units. The first one is somewhat of an aberration because the only Meccan surah there is Al-Fatiha. And then you have the 4 great Medinan surah. So really there are 6 after that. And if the first one is, it's this comprehensive Medinan Sharia theme of those large Medinan surahs, the other groups may can be, one interpretation is revolve around the 3 articles of core articles of faith. So the first 2 are on Risala, prophethood. And you can see, when it begins, it's with Yunus, Hud, Yusuf, Ra'ad, Ibrahim. So the prophets, are mentioned, Maryam, Taha, Al-Anbiya. And then, so that's the, one group. And then after that, you have An-Nur, which is the single Medinan surah. But then in the next Meccan group, where perhaps, the theme begins to shift, it's all intertwined towards Tawheed. You have 10 Meccan surahs after An-Nur that come before Yasin, and 10 that come after it, before it goes into the Medinan group. And so it finds itself right in the middle of this 21 Meccan surahs as the one that's smack dab in the middle. So there's this, in terms of arrangement, it's at the core of this cluster on Tawheed. And also
Tawheed meaning affirming divine unity. Yes.
Yeah. And this is not, a Mus'haf proper, but if you open a Mus'haf, Yasin roughly will open a little bit to the left, where the heart is a little bit left of the chamber of the chest cavity. So there's all these symbolisms that are embedded in, that people can read, into the saying of the Prophet. And those who are prone to accept this as miraculous and divine, for them, they find some solace and maybe some indications. There's obviously not discursive logic or any kind of proof.
Right. And just as a whoops, I hear an echo. Is that coming from you?
I didn't hear it.
I don't know. I'm hearing an echo. Anyway, the just for those who may not be familiar with the composition of the Quran, the arrangement of the Quran was done during the Prophet's lifetime, as it was a constantly growing, seamless recitation. And so there was and the Muslims believe that the Archangel Gabriel instructed the Prophet in terms of where certain verses that were being revealed, where they should be inserted in that growing recitation. And so sometimes we'll have a later cluster of verses, or even a single verse from the Medinan period, which is the later period of that 23-year span of revelation. Sometimes we'll have that stuck into an earlier surah, or vice versa. And so sometimes the chapters are not thoroughly, purely Medinan or purely Meccan. And so, but the arrangement of the Quran was not done by post-prophetic editors. This was when the Prophet died. The Prophet left a seamless recitation, which had been memorized by all of his companions and they were reciting it in a daily regular way. And so the Quran, before it became a written book, it was preserved through memorization and through this continual recitation. And so the Quran is, as we've said in earlier nights, so it's not a chronological book. Not, in fact, in some ways it's counter chronological. The later verses are kind of coming toward the beginning, and the earliest verses are coming toward the end. But it is but that's just a general statement, because there are all kinds of exceptions within the Quran. And so it doesn't have a sort of a beginning, middle, and end. In fact, it's more of a book of rings, or a book of, and we're going to see that again and again. So it's a very, very unusual kind of book, unlike any book certainly that I've ever read, because it's really not a linear reading experience. It's even though we're moving through it in a linear way, but it's not like any other book I've ever read, because it doesn't have that kind of progression in that sense. And it's really it can be very perplexing, but it can also be really really amazing, because it once you kind of get used to it, it really it has its own kind of its own logic, if we're willing to just sit with it and think about it and talk about it with a sage like Dr. Mahan. Yes. Okay. So lead on, Sidi.
Seen as the heart of the Quran, this surah, I'm just reading from that section, because we don't talk about the Quran as it's used in ritual as much. So I just want to read this brief section, and then I'll suggest on one way we can proceed today. But you're welcome to have another plan. Seen as the heart of the Quran, this surah plays a very important role in traditional Islamic piety. Many Muslims recite Yasin regularly as part of their supererogatory devotions. And it is often the only surah longer than a page or so that Muslims have memorized in full. One famous hadith says, "Recite Yasin over your dead. It is thus recited for those who are close to death or who have just died, and at the graves of loved ones. It is also recited for those who are sick." For another hadith states, "Verily, in the Quran there is a surah that intercedes through its recitation and forgives through its being heard. Indeed, that surah is Yasin." Yasin is also recited by many Muslims after the performance of the obligatory prayer in the morning and in the evening. Regarding the latter, another report, sometimes recorded as a hadith, states, "Whosoever recites Surah Yasin at night, desiring the face of God, is forgiven during that night." And so this is just an example of some of the fada'il, the virtues of the Quran, and different parts of the Quran will have different virtues, like Al-Kahf, the surah on the cave that came right in the middle. It should be recited on every Friday, and so on. Just exposing our audience a little bit to that kind of literature as well.
Yeah.
Now, Yasin, I find this opening so interesting, and what I suggest we do, we kind of, I know quality over quantity, but I suggest we kind of fly through and pick nuggets in a few of the coming surahs. So with Yasin, I basically just want to point out the beginning, and I have one place in the middle that I want to highlight for something very interesting, and then if there's anything you have, and then we can advance. But Yasin, wal Qur'an al Hakim, by the wise Quran, and we'll see these oath formulas as well, where God is swearing by by a natural phenomenon, the stars, and here by the wise Quran. So wal Quran al Hakim, and what is the oath being taken for? Innaka lamin al mursaleen.
Yes.
Verily, indeed, thou Muhammad, you Muhammad, are truly one of the messengers sent. And so what I find really fascinating is, when the revelation first came down, the Prophet Muhammad, he stood before his relatives, right? And he said, "Have you ever known me to lie, or to, be not keep my word. And it's like, no, you're Sadiq and Amin, like you're the truthful and the trustworthy. This is this is the appellations of the Prophet. And so he says, so now I'm telling you that I'm the messenger of God. And so we believe in the Quran because we believe in the truthfulness of the messenger. And once we believe in the Quran tells us, by this Quran, this is a messenger that's sent. So it comes back, and affirms the message. They affirm each other, which is just something remarkable. And he is ala siratin mustaqim, on a straight way. Tanzil al-Aziz al-Rahim. And this is with a revelation from the Almighty, the Lord of mercy. لِتُنذِرَ قَوْمًا. This is to warn a people, مَا أُنذِرَ آبَاؤُهُمْ, whose forefathers were not warned. So this is one explanation for why the Quran always says, إِنَّا جَعَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا, that we have made this an Arabic Quran, is because they knew of scriptures in other languages, but they didn't know of scripture in Arabic. And so here you've got it in Arabic, a prophet to you. And so to warn the people who were not previously warned in this way, except vicariously, through encounters, but they had not been sent a scripture, and now it's come to them, whose fathers have received no admonition. Yeah. Right. So they're unaware. So there's beautiful, narratives and stories in this. But the one point I wanted to highlight, so it talks about the prophethood, the hereafter, the signs of God in nature, the final hour, and this place on cosmology, which I enjoy tremendously. This is verse number, the signs of
40.
God are being mentioned.
Yeah, I think that was ayah 40. No,
ayah 40.
Starting 37.
Yeah, we can start with 38. 30, there's a whole sequence.
Yeah.
But the one, I enjoy this term was shamsu tajri. That the sun runs a determined course.
Yeah.
Right? Or it's moving to a resting place. Right? How is it translated in the study Quran? Let's see. And the sun runs to a dwelling place of its own. And this was, even in hadith, there was, the Prophet was questioned about this, and there were very, very interesting, interpretations of this idea that the sun is running. And when the cosmology shifts, and we realize it's actually the motion of the earth that's around the sun, we still experience the sun running its course. And so it's just an indication of how interpretations change, but the text can still uphold them with changing understandings of the world. And then it talks about the moon, and that it has, its phases, and the sun and the moon, don't outstrip each other. They kind of continue on their own phases. Kullun fi falakin yasbahun. Each, and these are the translations, each floats in its own orbit.
Yeah.
Or, and both translations say this, each just swims along its own orbit according to law. And then what does the study Quran say? Each glides in an orbit. So it's just an interesting imagery that is, lends itself to new modes of visualizing the heavens. But the point that I really love is the kullun fi falak is actually a palindrome. So it can be read forwards and backwards.
I see.
In the same way. And remember we talked about the heavens splitting asunder,
right,
and then being rolled up. So I just love, these hints, at least that I see. But if you read this kullun fi falak, palindrome is, if you read it forwards or backwards, it spells the same thing. There's
so
another.
You're looking at the Arabic letters, yeah.
Yeah, the Arabic letters.
Yeah,
Each,
yeah,
each floats in fi falak, like in the heavens, or in the yeah.
yeah. I think floats is a good word there, but and even before that, there's this sense that the sun, the separation of the sun and the moon, right? That the sun is not permitted, to overtake the moon, nor can the moon overtake the sun. But there's this sense of the pair always. Again, there's the pair, but in balance,
Right.
and this the planetary balance is presented here as one of the miraculous signs of God. And as you've rightly noted, the signs of God are not only in history. When the Quran says, do they not think about what happened to the peoples who came before? So we have these signs of God woven into the fabric of history, but we also have these signs of God in nature that are revealing the benevolent and miraculous nature of the world in which we live. And
Yeah.
and so much of the Quran is trying to wake us up to things that we had taken for granted,
Mhm.
and to see just the mystery and the miraculous nature of it.
The
Those are beautiful points.
the other place where a palindrome comes, I'll mention it now since we're on the topic of palindrome, is in Ya ayyuhal mudaththir qum fa'anzir wa rabbaka fakabbir. This rabbaka fakabbir, and your Lord magnify.
Mm.
If you read it forward and backwards, it's the same. And I remember Sheikh Hamza actually was talking about this, and he said basically what it means is if you magnify your Lord, he magnifies you. It goes both ways. That's the hint. So I mean, I haven't studied this comprehensively, but those somehow stood out to me at some point in the course of my study.
Yeah, I really did not think, as I was doing my homework and preparing for tonight, that we'd be talking about palindromes. So this is now really my neurons are firing in my brain right now, trying to start looking again at the Arabic text. Wow.
So
go ahead.
No. I was just jump to the next surah, but go ahead.
No, don't jump yet. Yeah. So couple of things. So obviously in these verses we have again many apocalyptic references to the blowing of the trumpet and the coming of the hour, as you mentioned, and the incredible regret that people will feel when it's too late to change their position. The promise that God will not that God will not wrong a single soul when it comes to the judgment. So there's this divine promise of fairness and justice. But then there's this really interesting verse toward the end of the surah where we read in ayah 65 that the body itself, meaning my body, is going to testify against me. So that means that my mouth will be sealed, so I can't make any excuses for all my bad behavior, all the things I've done. And my hands are going to say that we did this, or my feet are going to say we went here, and my body is going to testify against me. And so there's this it's a really a kind of a graphic way of kind of explaining just how naked we will be, how revealed we will be at that moment. And so the poet Rumi Maulana has this beautiful line about this. He said, so let the body bear witness now. Like, let your body give its testimony now, while you still have time to change your behavior and to mend your ways. And but it's really and that's all based on this Quranic teaching that we find in Surah Yasin about the fact that the that on Judgment Day, our ability to make excuses for ourselves will be sealed, and then our bodies are going to testify against us. It's a very alarming and graphic reference.
Yeah, it makes me think of that. These are not. We say it's my body, right? But it's not. It's a body that's been entrusted to me, and in the end, it will testify on my behalf or against my behalf. And so, what do I do with this is also a trust, like the wealth that I've been given is a trust. And so we feel we are owners of these things and possessors of these things, but really, these are all things that we've been endowed with, but they're not our own. We're something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As Rumi also refers to this as a rented house.
Yes.
This is a rented house. Yeah.
Yeah, and that really changes your perspective on identity and who you are, and how you move in the world.
Yeah. Before we leave Yasin, those first 5 verses have they're so simple, but and they have such a beautiful rhyme. So, and I know you love the rhymes. So, do you want to just read those first 5 ayat in Arabic and just let us sort of bask in the rhyming sound of it?
Sure. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yasin. Wal Qur'anil Hakim. Innaka laminal mursalin. على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون. You can see the rhyme switch from the E to the U. Yeah. When it goes from with a revelation from the Almighty, the Lord of mercy, to warn a people, and it switches.
Switches
the line. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. I'll now be compliant, and we can move to the next surah, inshallah.
Well, the next one has also this lovely rhyme. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Was-saffati saffa. فالزاجرات زجرا فالتاليات ذكرا إن إلهكم لواحد. So it climaxes there. That by those angels, that's one reading, arranged in rows or in ranks, safa, who rebuke reproachfully and recite God's word. Truly, your God is one. Yeah. The Lord of the heavens and the earth, and so on. It'll go on. There's this allusion. There's different interpretations of this. Let me see. But
those beings that are almost arranged in ranks.
In ranks.
In rows.
So it says, most read them as references to 3 sets of angels. Angels ranged in ranks before God, angels who drive the clouds, and angels who recite the Qur'an. Ranged in ranks renders safat saffan, which can also mean the spreaders spreading, a reading that may refer to the angels spreading their wings, or to birds, as in the reference to 24:41, by the birds spreading their wings. There also safat is used. Drivers can also mean the angels who drive human beings away from committing acts of disobedience, or who drive the Satans away from human beings. Driving renders zajara, which can also mean to rebuke. in light of this the interpretation, some understand reminder as a reference to the Quran by which God rebukes the ingrates.
Mm.
Yeah. And so there's more here, but this is elusive and requires interpretation as to what these things mean. But most have taken them to be different kinds of angels.
Right. And again, this is another one of these oaths. This is in the genitive case, so it's majrur. So it's the sign of a God again taking an oath, or the divine voice saying, "And by the ranks, by those who are arranged in rows or ranks." And so we're going to see these oaths come frequently in the Quran.
Right. And then there's some cosmology here, and it can be understood with the cosmological understanding of their time, but it requires rereadings, like a few verses down in number 6, the Lord of the heavens and the earth and everything in between, and the Lord of the easts, or Lord, which can be translated as Rabbul Masharik, the Lord of every sunrise. We have indeed decked the lower heaven with beauty in the stars, as-sama ad-dunya, which means there are other heavens.
Right.
This is the lowest one that we see. وَحِفْظًا مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْطَانٍ مَارِدٍ, and made them a safeguard against every rebellious devil. So you'll see in the next verse, they cannot eavesdrop on the higher assembly.
Yeah.
So لَا يَسَّمَّعُونَ إِلَى الْمَلَإِ الْأَعْلَى, the higher assembly, the exalted assembly, pelted from every side. So the shooting stars and all were interpreted as pelting, the devils that were trying to listen in to the divine assembly. Remember, there's the throne and the angels, which we'll see in a Zumar, kind of, praising God. And so this kind of imagery is very, very interesting. What do you think?
No, it's very, very interesting, and I think it's more than likely all kind of metaphorical, but the references to I've always been struck by this reference to al-mala al-a'la, the peoples of the heaven, or the peoples of the most high level of reality. It's interesting here that that again plural is being used for the easts, and where there's different heavens, and I'm reminded, just going back to the very first ayah of the entire Quran, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, praise belongs to God, who is the Lord of all the worlds. There's this sense of the plurality of worlds, or the plurality of realities, or we now talk about the different what do we call them, these different aspects of reality, or these different what's the word that we use?
Dimensions, realms.
Yeah, different dimensions, or there's, with Spider-Man, they have a
multiverse.
Yeah, the multiverse. But there's this sense of the multiverse in the Quran.
Don't ask me how I know that.
Yeah,
Through Spider-Man.
Yeah. But I was trying to think, what do they call it in Spider-Man? But yeah, exactly. So but it's really interesting. And then there's this reference, and it's not just here, in other parts of the Quran too, to this idea of like an assembly of beings in the highest heaven, like these people who exist in the highest heaven. And it's really interesting, and that could be a reference to to the angels who are surrounding the throne of God. But it's a very mysterious and beautiful reference.
So if there's one place we stop in the surah, it mentions again, it has a lot on the prophets, a huge section on Ibrahim,
Yeah.
alayhi salam, Abraham, and then Isaac and Musa, Moses and Aaron, Elias, Lut, Yunus, and then lovely closing at the end. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala mursalin. Glory be to the one, the Lord of Majesty, Rabbil Izzah, Lord of all exaltedness, beyond what anyone attributes to him, and peace be upon the messengers, on those who were sent. And walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, and all praise be to God, Lord of the world. So it's a lovely surah. But if there's one place we stop, this section on Abraham, it summarizes his whole story, where he was, cast into the blazing fire.
Yeah.
And then he says, Inni dhahibun ila rabbi sayahdin. He went on his way, he left, he emigrated. And then he prayed for a righteous son, and we gave him good news that he would have a patient son. But this dialogue here between him and his son after he sees the dream is profound. This is verse 102. And you notice it's arresting. The verses are short, right?
Right.
Rabbi habli min as-salihin, fabashsharnahu bi ghulamin halim. And then the next verse, long verse, ending with the same rhyme, sabirin. But here it goes. When the boy was old enough to work with his father, Abraham said, that's when kind of you enjoy your child in a totally different way. I mean, it's all enjoyment, but that's, when it's companionship. When the boy was old enough to work with his father, Abraham said, my son, I have seen myself sacrificing you in a dream. And so he says, what do you think?
Yeah, it's quite startling.
He talked to him, and he said, the son says, Father, do as you are commanded. God willing, you will find me steadfast. Like, if this is what you've been commanded, it's got to be true. And so we don't see this in other places, where actually it wasn't Abraham who kind of just took his son, and the son's like, what are you doing? And he's fulfilling his dream, but rather he's actually talking to his son, and they both submit. Muslimaini lak, which is in Baqarah, make us the dual, those to both of us who submit for you.
And here it's dual again. Exactly.
The dual. When they both submitted to God, وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ, and he laid his son down on the side of his face. وَنَادَيْنَاهُ أَنْ يَا Ibrahim, and we called out to him, oh, Abraham, this is it. You fulfilled your dream. And this is how we reward those who do good. Now, obviously, this whole story has been, by critical theory, ripped to shreds. Like, what kind of God would do this? And what is this signaling? So, but on the one sense, if you read it as metaphor, right, not as literally true, then what speaks to me about this is, after all, the work you've done in your life, just when you've invested everything, say in a business or in your own career, just when it's about to flourish, you have to stand for the truth and let it all go.
Right.
And
that what is being asked is for you to let go of the most precious thing in your life, because Abraham had been begging God for a son, and God gave him a son. And of course, in the Qur'an, this is happening before the good news of Abraham's second son, Isaac, comes. That's going to come a few verses later. So Muslims understand this son to be his firstborn son, Ismail or Ishmael. And so Abraham's willingness to give back to God that which is most precious to him in this world is certainly a feature. And I know that some of my rabbi friends have told me that there are versions of this in the oral Torah, that the sacrifice of Abraham, where or understandings of this that see this even as a failed test, because that in the rabbinic commentary, they at least entertain the possibility of Abraham misunderstanding what this test was about, and so then God stopped him from committing a mistake, a grave mistake. But what's really important, however we want to understand this, is that clearly God is not interested in human sacrifice. God appreciates the purity of both Abraham's heart and the heart of his son. Also, there's an oral tradition, oral Torah tradition, a rabbinic commentary that has, and of course, in the rabbinic telling of the story and the biblical telling of the story, the son is Isaac and not Ishmael. But it doesn't really matter which son we're talking about here. But there is a telling of the story where Isaac is a knowing and willing participant as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting that seems to be what's the version of the story that's being echoed here, and it's I guess the point is that God ransoms the son. God doesn't want anyone to die, but God sees the devotion and then replaces the son with a sacrifice, and this actually becomes then one of the two major feasts of the Islamic year, is the ransoming of Ishmael, and so this is the second feast that we celebrate after the feast that's at the end of Ramadan.
After the pilgrimage. Annual pilgrimage, the sacrifice, and that pilgrimage commemorates the footsteps of Abraham, and the house that the two built according to Muslim tradition in Mecca,
and the footsteps of Abraham's other wife,
Hagar, who's the mother of Ishmael. Yes.
Yeah, that's part of our pilgrimage, is walking in her footsteps and commemorating. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, this is great. The one thing that I may just add, because I've gotten this question, and it might sound silly, but sometimes people ask, like, if they see a dream that they just know is a true and vivid dream, and it's asking for something that doesn't seem rational, should I be like Abraham and stuff? And so sometimes questions are difficult, but this one is very easy. No, you're not a prophet. There's a Sharia, there's a lesson in this for us, but don't be out of your mind and think that if you see a dream of some sort that you're emulating the prophet by, fulfilling it in some way. So,
but one of the ways that we emulate Ibrahim in this case is we tell other people our dream, right? And so this is really interesting.
Nice. Yes, I see it.
and he woke up, and he told his son, I had this vision, I had this dream.
Yeah. And what do you think?
And of course we do believe that some dreams are just our brain, detoxing at night, and processing our stress or whatever else it is. But sometimes it is possible to have a true and visionary dream. But one of the things that we know also about the Prophet Muhammad and his companions is that they discussed their dreams. They brought their dreams to the Prophet. They discussed their dreams with one another. And so the dream was never, let's say, a private matter. It was something that they would share and discuss, and sometimes they would find great instruction and great wisdom in the content of their dreams. And here, even though Abraham is talking to God directly and is God's friend and very close to God, he woke up and he still shared his dream with his son,
like Joseph shared it with his father, but
exactly.
but they share it in a very intimate, in a smart way. And then the father of Joseph had said, "Don't tell your brothers." So don't broadcast it necessarily, but talk to someone. Okay, I'm gonna jump to Surah Saad. We probably won't get through it because there are a couple of really fascinating stories in here that we should read about David and Solomon.
Right, and lots of discussion of how the prophets before were rejected this is going to be coming up again and again and again, because obviously it's mirroring the Prophet Muhammad's own experience.
Yeah.
But go ahead, take us to Dawood and Solomon.
Yeah, but the opening again is an interesting one. This time it's just one letter, like Taha is 2 letters. Alif Lam Mim is 3 letters. Kaf Ha Ya Ain Sad, it's 5 letters. Noon, 1 letter. Qaf, 1 letter. And here you have 1 letter. Sad. So Sad. Wal Qur'ani fi dhikr. By the Quran with its reminding. The dhikr, the reminding Quran. It's a beautiful opening. But الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فِي عِزَّةٍ وَشِقَاقٍ. Yet the disbelievers, or the ingrates,
yes, the ingrates, the rejectors,
are steeped in arrogance and hostility.
Yeah.
كَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ مِنْ قَرْنٍ. How many generations have we destroyed before them? And so, this is a living warning for us. I mean, when you see these, we see natural disasters increasing, but like these rapid fires move through a whole, how many a town has been destroyed. And so don't think we're immune to this. All right. So,
okay.
That's just the opening. Should we do one? Do you want to go to David?
Okay, you go ahead. Take us. Where do you want to start with David?
So I believe it's verse 21 I marked.
Okay.
Have you heard the story of the 2 litigants who climbed into his private quarters? This is into the private quarters of David. I think he's mentioned earlier. Let me see where his mention comes.
I think it starts at 17.
Yeah, because so the people of Noah and Ad and the Pharaoh, and the people of the pillars, the stakes, they disbelieved, and Thamud and Lot. So it's mentioning all these prophets, and they were, a single blast overtook them, which is frightening, because I mean, that's the easiest way we can imagine our own demise. A nuclear holocaust or another asteroid. I mean, we're just a little ball floating in a deep, dark, space.
Yeah.
And something comes hurling, and we know that people in white. So, a single blast overtook them. And let's see.
So we're coming back to the two the 2 brothers who were having the fight.
Yeah, they climbed into his private quarters. Yeah, and then it comes. Yeah, it's actually after that when they reach David. So it just goes into his story. When they reached David, he took fright. But they said, "Do not be afraid." And based on this, because of interest of time, I'm just going to interpret as we go a little bit. That there's one interpretation is that these were angels that had come to test him, but he didn't know it, because he was his fortress was pretty much impenetrable. And so when people came in, he's like, "Whoa, how do they do this?" So they're there to test him, perhaps. We are 2 litigants, one of whom has wronged the other. Judge between us fairly. Do not be unjust, and guide us to the right path. This is my brother. He had 99 ewes, and I just the one. And he said, "Let me take charge of her," and overpowered me with his words. This is an ayah of sajda, so afterwards of prostration. So, make your prostration after the session is done. David said, "He has done you wrong by demanding to add your ewe to his flock." Like, if he had 99, you had 1, and he wants your 1 also. This is not right. Many partners treat each other unfairly. Those who sincerely believe and do good deeds do not do this, but these are very few. Then David realized that we had been testing him. And so he asked his Lord for forgiveness, fell down on his knees, and repented. And there's a whole interpretive tradition on this, and one of them is that basically he shouldn't have been frightened, and he's a man of justice. But really, the one that is I think the dominant interpretation is that he sent a soldier to the front lines so that almost he would be assured death in battle, and so that he could have his wife.
Yeah, this is the biblical account of David. That's right, and the sin of David. And but in the Bible also he repented, and God forgave him.
Yes.
And hence Solomon was born.
Yeah. So this is
but the Quranic discussion of the prophets doesn't allow for this kind of transgression. And this is an interesting difference between the biblical presentation of the prophets and the Quranic presentation of the prophets, because the Quran doesn't present the prophets as people who commit grave sins, right? And so the prophets in the Quran are not prone to this kind of failing. And yet here, right, it's it's clear that David is asking forgiveness, right, from his Lord,
right,
and falls down before God and asks for forgiveness, and God forgives him. And but I also made a note of this because it's very unclear as to what David's mistake may have been.
Right. Well, and the study Quran, talks about this, and it leaves open the possibility of both interpretations, and the commentators differed. And it wouldn't be a major sin because the prophets, that's something we believe are immune to it. I mean, sending the soldier to war would in and of itself not be a sin, and then marrying someone who was then again available would not be a sin. But there's something there that's definitely a major sin, but there's something there that's not quite kosher. Right.
Yes.
And he realizes that, but he needs this example to be instructed. So both are left open. And then the one of Solomon is also interesting. But the next verse, so we forgave him his misdeed. His reward will be nearness to us. Inna lahu indana la zulfa wa husna ma'ab. And then I love this. Ya Dawood, inna ja'alnaka khalifatan fil ard. So, O David, we indeed made you. And now you can interpret this. The word literally means caliph, like he was the caliphate.
Right.
But basically, he was given the right. He was a vicegerent, mastery over the land, or he was made as the successor of rightful authority. Yeah.
So judge between men in truth, and do not follow the lusts, right? Do not follow lust, for they will, for the passions will mislead you from the path of God. So this
lust or desire.
Or desire. But this seems to corroborate the idea that maybe desire had something to do with his sin, because he's being or his mistake, because he's being counseled not to follow those.
Yeah, not to follow those. And I just got an interesting comment that could it also be that he didn't actually, follow through, but he had this intention, and God instructed him, to save him even from following through. Wallahu alam.
And God knows best. That's right.
And God knows best. And then we come to the story of Solomon, but we are at the hour. And so should we... there's Job, and there's again Adam and Iblis come in this surah. And so maybe we'll let
And
Hey,
Job
Job.
is there waiting for us. Yes. Oh,
Yes.
and again, another reference to the people of the highest heaven. Okay, so we need to find, and Adam and Iblis again.
Yes,
There's
Adam.
some here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But
So,
we go ahead.
mm,
I can't wait for Zumar as well.
yeah.
That whole sequence of surahs that comes Zumar, and then it's the Hawamim, the surahs
Yeah.
that begin with Hamim.
Yeah.
Again, two letters, but different letters now. And there is a thematic progression from Zumar through the first four that's absolutely mind blowing. And so, inshallah, tomorrow, if God
Inshallah.
wills.
If God gives us life.
Inshallah.
Okay. Again, quality over quantity. Thank you for I've heard some things tonight for the very first time. So I'm going to go to bed tonight with palindromes on my brain. But really interesting. Really interesting. There's so many ways in which we can look at this text. It's almost like a prism that we're holding up to the light, and we're seeing the light kind of refracted and,
yes,
and reflected.
it's endless.
Really, yeah, it's endless.
Its wonders will never cease, and the scholars will never be satiated. It's just a remarkable. I mean, it is this is the only miracle that the Prophet will claim and proclaim as evidence for his prophethood. He had other miracles, but they were never brought forward as evidence for prophethood. This is it. It's the Qur'an. Take it or leave it. And so, yeah.
Well, I think that the theme of these nights is that we should take it, and
Yes.
but we're taking it in all of its richness and infinite possibility. So that's really, it's a wonderful way to read. So thank you, Sidi. Why don't you close us out with our customary closing with Surah Al-Asr.
So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر صدق الله العظيم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.